Classic sort of Jewish lore, there's always a story of the shoemaker or the milk salesman, milkman, who some individual who's troubled in his soul walks into the shoemaker, and the shoemaker somehow says the one thing to him that is exactly what that person's troubled soul needed to hear, and he walks off, and the shoemaker had no idea of what it is that he said and the impact of what he said, and they never see each other again. And yet somehow he not only fixed his soul, he fixed his soul. And I thought, well, why don't we do that? Why don't we have a shop where whoever walks in, treat them as if they're the holiest people in the world, and sort of open yourself, listen, and be in Hebrew we call it a Kiddush Hashem. Sanctify God's name just in the encounter. Don't worry about finding out what's going to happen later and being in touch with him and making sure he goes in any right direction. So that was the idea, and that worked exceptionally well, and it was an incredible, every time I'd open the door, I wouldn't know what Hashem would send through the shop, and it was always some other interesting encounter. About 20 years ago, actually almost to this week, 20 years ago, the Berlin Wall fell. And when the Berlin Wall fell, hundreds of thousands of Jews came into the land of Israel, just like God prophesied they would in Isaiah and Jeremiah. I'm going to bring them back from the land of the north. And which is incredible anyway, but something happened when the Iron Curtain fell, another curtain began to fall as well. The curtain that separated Christians and Jews began to fall as well. Everybody still with their preconceived ideas, etc., but suddenly churches were asking questions they never asked before. What are the Hebraic roots of our faith? Is the church the new Israel? Has it taken over for the old Israel? Is Israel a physical place in the Bible, or is it simply a spiritual place that we keep in our heart? And if so, what is the Christians' approach to Israel? What is Israel's approach to the Christians? So anyway, that seemed to be bubbling under the surface, and suddenly, to our great surprise, because we were open to anybody with any questions, whoever they are, whatever they're coming with, we started getting one person after another, and then it became one group after another, to the point where today we get about 4 to 5 groups a day that'll come in, sometimes 2 or 3, sometimes 4 or 5, that'll come in, and the store suddenly stops being a store and becomes a learning center. And so we actually shut the door, pull out the chairs, and give them that opportunity to encounter a world they have no conception of. Their only conception is through their own paradigms and their own doctrinal glasses. I didn't know the Christians didn't know the Jews love God. Christians believe the Jews love law. And if that's the case, no wonder we can't talk to each other, because there's a certain sense of arrogance that, like, and now Jews don't express their love of God because, it's not going to the saloon and talking with the boys about their intimate relationship with their beloved. It is the most intimate of our dialogues, and that's something now there's nothing wrong with them openly talking about it, but it's not something we do. So as a result, Christians believe, well, they'll talk about their Torah, they'll talk about mitzvot, they'll talk about their Jewish law, but they won't talk God. And so I'm not blaming, but that is a fact. So that was one surprise. The other surprise was I also learned how deeply insecure Christians felt about themselves. They feel themselves constantly being unworthy. And because they're unworthy, they can't come before God. That's theological understanding, doctrine. You can't come before God because you're filled with sin. You're filled with sin. And so you need something else to get you, somebody to take your hand and walk you through. And that's very foreign to Jews. Jews believe that as unworthy as we are, God created us to be the broken vessel that would declare God's greatness. So there's an old Jewish Hasidic story about walking with 2 pieces of paper, one in one hand, one in one pocket, and the other in the other. One piece of paper says, I'm nothing, I'm a speck of sand in the universe, and the other one says, I'm awesome because God created me as awesome, and I have a role to achieve in this world. That tightrope of walking between falling into arrogance and between falling into despondency is the walk of faith. And I find that Christians have unless we really delve deeper, usually have a hard time with that walk. It has to be either or. And that was a surprise to me. Even though we're highlighting difference in some ways, we're also highlighting bridges. We're also highlighting places of contact. We're also relating to the fact that both of us are children of the same Father in heaven. So there's commonality. But yet still, we're focusing on the things that separate us. And yet they still come back. And they come back again and again. And I never asked why, because I thought it would be almost unusual for me to ask, until one individual came from Colorado, and I said to him, he kept coming back, and he went on a journey, and he's on a journey of self-discovery in terms of who he is and how his relationship is with God, with Hashem. And I said, why do you keep coming back? Why did you keep, why, if I went into a store and I heard things that were totally the opposite of what I believed, I don't know if I'd keep returning. And he said, you know what, deep down, all of us know we need to keep searching. All of us yearn to find out more about who we are. And here was a place that said, whoever walks in is holy, whoever walks in is okay, and we'll agree to disagree, but no one's going to be made to feel less than because of the disagreement. And so the ability to have a place where the empirical truth is, we're here to talk God. We're here to talk about our relationship with God. We're here to talk about the love of God. That's a welcome place, an oasis in a world where every mention of God is a source of discourse. And every mention of faith becomes a statement of weakness or of unusual. Here it's a welcome, so everybody comes in with their understanding of their relationship with God, and everybody yearns to delve in it deeper, not to reconfirm what they already know, which is true of most conversation. Here it's like, what can I learn more? What can I know more? So thank God, it's because that's what my desire is, to constantly, in these encounters, learn more. I think that becomes almost something that they share, and then suddenly this becomes a safe place to come back and still walk out in disagreement, but at least enriched by an opportunity to delve deeper. Because once you open people up, something else begins to happen. Once you look for commonality, and the commonality is the soul that each of us received from on high, then suddenly incredible bridges begin to develop. In addition to which, this isn't happening in Toronto, this isn't happening in New York, this is happening in Jerusalem, the center of the spiritual world, right? God says that the footstool of his throne is only 50 meters away from here. So there's something else going on, there's churning. Everybody who comes to this land, no matter why he thinks he's come, something's churning inside of him, something spiritual is whispering to him. And sometimes the noise is so loud he doesn't hear the whisper. And I think what the store allows somebody to do is suddenly become aware of the whisper he's already feeling, and actually relate to it and connect to it, and almost have an experience of, right, that's what I've been hearing all along. That's what keeps it happening. People keep saying that, like, that confirms it. And what happens then is they have to turn back and turn to God and say, you know what, God, I don't understand this, you're in charge. That's the most powerful spiritual step a person can take, putting God back as sovereign rather than doctrine and understanding. Even these encounters that I'm seeing in the shop are just another piece of the puzzle that's falling into place. I have a window of my shop facing the middle, large square in the middle of the center of the universe. And I was thinking to myself, I'm watching redemption blossoming before my eyes. Right? Zechariah 8 says there will yet be a time when old men and old women will rest on their canes and children will play in the streets of Jerusalem. I just look outside, and I'm looking at exactly the same face that Zechariah saw in his vision. It's mind-blowing to me to think that some of the children Zechariah saw in his vision could have been my own children. And Jeremiah says, I'll bring them back from the land of the north. Every day I'll see a group of Russian Jews walking right by my shop, and I'm saying to myself, my goodness, I'm looking at the same faces that Jeremiah saw. He saw them in a vision. I'm seeing them with my eyes. And then Ezekiel 36 says, the Talmud and Rashi says, the greatest sign that redemption has begun is look to the trees. When you see the fruits blossoming after a land being lying barren and wasted for hundreds of thousands of years, actually. Right? Suddenly it begins to grow and blossom. The desert begins to bloom. The people who came here to grow this land weren't farmers. They never picked up a pitchfork in their lives. They weren't allowed to own land in any of the lands they came from. And yet suddenly the ground begins to be fertile, and the trees begin to blossom and give fruit after being barren for thousands of years. That's God doing that. The sense here, there isn't the same sense, by the way, amongst my fellow Jews in North America. But when you're here, you breathe something different. You know there's something. You sense, there's a definite sense of expectancy of listening and hearing the footsteps of the Mashiach. Everyone senses it. Everyone sees every little incident that occurs as another footfall. Something else has moved. We moved one step closer. And you'll hear it in every conversation, right? Maybe elsewhere we talk about hockey and baseball. Here they're talking about, whoa, this is another sign. The term will be used again and again. Must be the sign of Mashiach. Here's another sign of Mashiach. It's electric sometimes in here. And sometimes it's frightening, because it's going to be difficult times as well, but it's palpable, it's felt, it's actually depended on. Because if you think about it, there are 5 million Muslim guns and missiles aimed at exactly the spot where you and I are sitting. And yet people get up in the morning and smile. They send their children to school. And the reason they do that is because one of the things the Jewish people have learned is, first of all, the eternal people have no fear of the long voyage. That's a critical lesson. The second is, we're at the end of that long voyage. And the sense is real that it's going to happen. And so there's a feeling, if I just do what I do, if I get up and sanctify God's name, if I get up and my job in this world is to make this world a place of godliness, then all the other pieces of the puzzle will fall into place as we see them happening right before our eyes. So all the nations of the earth will come to one place and worship God together. And in the end of days, he will be one and his name will be one. And one of the questions I keep getting asked, so wait a second, are you guys wanting to build a temple? Isn't that going to cause World War III? What, are you going to kick the Muslims out? The whole Muslim world will be in an uproar, etc., etc. And the truth is, the question is a very appropriate question if you consider that those events are going to happen in the context of how we live our life today. Except Jews do know that the building of a temple will only occur when Isaiah 11 is fulfilled. The Messiah will come and Isaiah 11 is fulfilled. What does Isaiah 11 tell us? Isaiah 11 says the knowledge of God will cover the earth like water covers the ocean. Meaning, all men will know what God wants. It's not going to be, I have a vision of building a temple and the Muslims have a different vision and we're going to have to deal with that probably in a nuclear conflagration. It means something else. All of us will hear God speaking to us because we'll all be hearing the same voice telling us, God says, I want to build a prayer house for all nations. Because at that time, the people that truly can sense and hear the vision of God, and that's all mankind, because the knowledge of God will cover the earth like water covering an ocean, then the third temple is not going to be a problem, it's going to be the solution. It's not going to be the thing that will be the tinderbox, it will actually be the place of coming together and building together. Just like the old barns they used to build all together, that's what this third temple is going to be. All the nations bringing whatever they bring and saying, I want to be part of this construction. So it's actually the perfect paradigm of the exact opposite of what everybody fears. One of the groups that came in was an unusual group. They were very, very poor Indians from a small island in Papua New Guinea. They had saved up money and had come to be in the land of Israel. And it was a dramatic, and where they are, by the way, is a Muslim-controlled part, and they're an attacked minority of Christians. They came into the land. They didn't speak English, so I had to speak through an interpreter. And as I spoke, I saw, and when you speak through an interpreter, there's a certain cadence that develops. It's actually very powerful because words are very short. And I saw almost like drips of water, breaking open rocks and their hearts. And I was moved by it. And at the end of the conversation, at the end of our little talk, I saw people getting up and moved, and one man came over to me, an older man, took my hand, turned it over, opened up a little plastic little thing, and poured out 3 little gold shavings. And I said through the interpreter, what is this? And the man said through his interpreter, I work in a gold mine, and I went to my boss and I said, can I please take these little 3 gold shavings to Israel? Because Isaiah 60 says that the nations of the world will bring their wealth into the land, and I want to be a fulfillment of that prophecy. I found that very moving. Rashi, one of our sages, says on that verse that the gold will be used for the third temple. So I said to this man through the interpreter, you know what, tomorrow morning, and this was already, everybody was standing and listening, tomorrow morning I'm going to take this to the Temple Institute, and they'll melt it down and use it for the artifacts of the third temple. As soon as I said that, 3 women jumped up One of them literally almost ripped off her necklace, another one took off her earrings, and another one took off a beautiful gold brooch of the Papua New Guinea, one of the leaders of the group, Papua New Guinea bird, and put it in my hand and said, take this too. And I thought, well, that's incredible, it's almost biblical. And I said, you know what? I took it the next day and I met Chaim Richmond from the Temple Institute. And I said, I've got some gold for the Temple Institute. He goes, I can't believe you're bringing it to me now. We're actually going to melt down gold to recover the gold menorah on the steps. And I said, well, here it is. And sure enough, on that gold menorah, on the steps leading to the Western Wall, is some of the gold brought by a small tribe in the middle of the Pacific who are fulfilling a prophecy in Isaiah 60.